The Lost City of Atlantis. The Lost City of Atlantis has captivated the imagination of people for centuries. The story of a powerful and advanced civilization that suddenly disappeared without a trace has inspired countless theories and legends. But what is the truth behind the myth of Atlantis? The first recorded mention of Atlantis comes from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he describes a powerful and advanced civilization that existed around 9,000 years before his time. According to Plato, Atlantis was a highly organized and technologically advanced society with a complex system of government and a powerful navy. The city was said to be located on an island continent in the Atlantic Ocean and was visited by the Greek god Poseidon, who fell in love with a mortal woman and had 5 sets of twins with her. Plato's account of Atlantis is the only primary source of information about the lost city, and many historians and archaeologists have questioned its validity. Some argue that Plato invented the story as a way to illustrate his philosophy, while others believe that it was based on a real historical event. One theory is that Atlantis was based on the Minoan civilization that existed on the island of Crete, around 2000 BC. The Minoans were a highly advanced and sophisticated society, with a complex system of government, art, and architecture. They also had a powerful navy, as evidenced by the many ship frescoes that have been found on Crete. The Minoan civilization came to an abrupt end around 1450 BC, possibly due to a volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera. Another theory is that Atlantis was based on the ancient city of Tartessos, located in what is now Spain. Tartessos was a powerful and advanced civilization that flourished between the 8th and 6th centuries BC. It had a complex system of government, advanced metallurgy, and a powerful navy. Tartessos also had a sudden and mysterious decline, and the city was eventually abandoned. Yet another theory suggests that Atlantis was located in the Mediterranean, specifically in the region of the modern-day island of Santorini, which was destroyed by a massive volcanic eruption around 1600 BC. This theory claims that the island was home to a prosperous Minoan colony, which was overwhelmed by the eruption and tsunamis caused by it. Despite the many theories and legends surrounding the lost city of Atlantis, the truth behind the myth remains elusive. The lack of concrete evidence makes it difficult to say with certainty what really happened to the civilization and where it was located. However, the enduring fascination with Atlantis speaks to the human desire to uncover the secrets of the past and understand our own history. Fall of the Roman Empire. The fall of the Roman Empire is one of the most significant events in human history, marking the end of one of the greatest and most powerful civilizations the world has ever seen. The Roman Empire was known for its vast territory, military might, and sophisticated system of government and law. However, despite its many achievements, the empire ultimately fell victim to a combination of internal and external factors. One of the main internal factors that contributed to the fall of the Roman Empire was economic instability. The empire's economy had long been based on slave labor, which proved to be unsustainable in the long term. As the empire expanded, the cost of acquiring and maintaining slaves became increasingly prohibitive, leading to economic decline. Additionally, the empire's currency was debased by constant inflation, making it difficult for the government to fund its many ambitious projects and military campaigns. Another major internal factor was political instability. The Roman Empire was ruled by a series of weak and ineffective emperors, many of whom came to power through military coups rather than legitimate succession. This lack of strong leadership contributed to a decline in morale and a loss of faith in the empire's ability to govern effectively. External factors also played a significant role in the fall of the Roman Empire. One of the most significant of these was the invasions by barbarian tribes such as the Visigoths, Huns, and Ostrogoths. These invasions put a tremendous strain on the empire's military and resources, ultimately leading to its collapse. Additionally, the empire's vast territory made it difficult to defend, and it was constantly under threat from neighboring powers such as the Persians and the Goths. Another external factor was the spread of Christianity. While Christianity would eventually become the dominant religion of the empire, in the beginning, it was a minority religion, and the Roman authorities saw it as a threat to the traditional Roman religion and culture. The empire's attempts to suppress the religion led to increased tensions, and ultimately contributed to its downfall. The fall of the Roman Empire was a gradual process, spanning several decades. However, it is generally agreed that the empire officially fell in 476 AD, when the Germanic king Odoacer deposed the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustus. The fall of the empire marked the end of an era and had a profound impact on the world. It led to the rise of feudalism in Europe, the spread of Christianity, and the beginning of the Middle Ages. The legacy of the Roman Empire can still be seen today in the many ways it has influenced Western civilization, and its fall continues to be studied and debated by historians and scholars. Story of Cleopatra. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt, is one of the most famous women in history. She is known for her beauty, intelligence, and political savvy, as well as her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. However, the true story of Cleopatra is far more complex than the popular image of her as a seductive and powerful queen. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC, the daughter of Ptolemy XII, the pharaoh of Egypt. Her family, known as the Ptolemies, were of Greek descent and had ruled Egypt for over 200 years. Cleopatra was not the eldest child, but she was the only one of her siblings to be trained in the traditional Egyptian manner, which included the study of hieroglyphs and religion. This education set her apart from her siblings and allowed her to be more effective in Egyptian politics. In 51 BC, Cleopatra's father died, leaving the throne to her and her brother Ptolemy XIII. The two siblings ruled Egypt together as co-regents, but their relationship was fraught with tension and conflict. Cleopatra was determined to assert her authority and restore Egypt's former glory, while Ptolemy XIII was more interested in consolidating his own power. In 48 BC, Cleopatra was forced to flee Egypt and seek refuge in Syria. It was during this exile that Cleopatra first met Julius Caesar, who had recently defeated her brother's army in Egypt. Caesar was impressed by Cleopatra's intelligence and ambition, and the two began a relationship. Cleopatra returned to Egypt with Caesar's support, and she and Ptolemy XIII engaged in a civil war for control of the country. Cleopatra emerged victorious, and she and Caesar had a son, Caesarion. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, Cleopatra aligned herself with Mark Antony, one of Caesar's key supporters. The two had a tumultuous relationship, marked by political maneuvering and personal conflicts. They had 3 children together, and were known for their luxurious lifestyle and ambitious plans to expand the Roman Empire. However, their relationship ultimately proved to be their downfall. In 31 BC, Octavian, Caesar's nephew and the future emperor Augustus, defeated Antony and Cleopatra's forces in the Battle of Actium. Faced with defeat, Antony and Cleopatra committed suicide, and Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. Cleopatra's death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty, and the last independent pharaoh of Egypt. Cleopatra's legacy is a complex one. On one hand, she is remembered as a powerful and intelligent queen who fought to maintain Egypt's independence in the face of Roman expansion. On the other hand, she is also remembered for her relationships with Caesar and Antony, and her role in their political downfall. Her story has been retold and romanticized in literature, art and film, often depicting her as a seductive and powerful woman. But the real Cleopatra was much more than that. She was a skilled politician, a patron of the arts, and a leader who fought to preserve the legacy of her country. Secrets of the Pyramids. The Pyramids of Giza, located on the outskirts of Cairo, Egypt, are some of the most iconic and mysterious structures in the world. These massive stone structures, built around 4,500 years ago, have captivated the imaginations of people for centuries. But despite their fame, many of the secrets of the pyramids remain a mystery. The Great Pyramid of Giza, also known as the Pyramid of Khufu, is the largest and oldest of the pyramids. It stands at 147 meters 481 feet tall and was originally covered in white limestone, which has since been stripped away. The pyramid is believed to have been built as a tomb for the pharaoh Khufu, who ruled Egypt around 2589–2566 BC. The construction of the pyramids is a mystery in itself. The pyramids are made of limestone blocks that weigh an average of 2.5 tons each. It is estimated that the Great Pyramid of Giza contains over 2 million limestone blocks. The question of how the ancient Egyptians were able to move and place these massive blocks with such precision is still debated among scholars. Many theories have been proposed, including the use of ramps, pulleys, and even levitation. The internal structure of the pyramids is also a source of mystery. The pyramids contain narrow corridors, chambers, and shafts that are not easily accessible. The main burial chamber of the Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, is located deep inside the pyramid and can only be accessed through a narrow passage. The purpose of these internal features is still not entirely understood. One of the most mysterious features of the pyramids is the so-called air shafts that were discovered in the early 20th century. These shafts, located in the pyramid's burial chamber, point towards the stars and were thought to have been used for ventilation. However, recent studies have suggested that these shafts may have been used for a more spiritual purpose, such as aligning the pharaoh's soul with the stars in the afterlife. Another enigma is the so-called pyramid's curse, which is a belief that anyone who disturbs the mummy of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh will suffer bad luck or death. This belief is said to originate with the opening of the tomb of King Tutankhamun by archaeologist Howard Carter in 1922. Some members of the expedition died under mysterious circumstances, and it was said to be due to the curse. But this is just a myth, there's no scientific evidence to support it. In conclusion, the pyramids of Giza are not only architectural marvels, but also a historical enigma. Despite the many theories and studies, many of the secrets of the pyramids remain unsolved. The pyramids continue to inspire curiosity and awe, and they remain one of the most iconic symbols of ancient Egyptian civilization. The enigma of the Mayans. The Mayan civilization, which flourished in parts of present-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras, is one of the most enigmatic ancient cultures in the world. The Mayans developed a complex society, with advanced knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and architecture. But despite their achievements, many aspects of Mayan civilization remain a mystery. One of the most mysterious aspects of the Mayans is their sudden collapse. Around the year 900 AD, the Mayan civilization began to decline rapidly. Cities were abandoned, trade networks disintegrated, and monumental architecture was no longer constructed. The cause of this collapse is still a subject of much debate among scholars. Climate change, overpopulation, and warfare are among the most commonly cited explanations, but none of these theories can fully account for the sudden and widespread collapse. The Mayans also developed a complex system of writing, which was used to record history, religious texts, and astronomical observations. But despite the wealth of information contained in these texts, much of the meaning of Mayan hieroglyphs remains a mystery. The Mayans used a combination of logographic and syllabic symbols, and many of the symbols have yet to be deciphered. The Mayans were also skilled architects and engineers. They built impressive pyramids, plazas, and temples, many of which are still standing today. But the methodologies used by the Mayans to construct these monumental buildings remain a mystery. The Mayans did not use the wheel, and they did not have beasts of burden. They also lacked iron tools, yet they were able to cut, shape, and transport massive stone blocks. The Mayans also developed a complex calendar system that was more accurate than any other calendar system in use at the time. The Mayans used a combination of solar and lunar calendars and were able to predict eclipses with a high degree of accuracy. But despite their understanding of astronomy, the Mayans did not develop the telescope or any other instrument that would have allowed them to observe the stars in greater detail. In conclusion, the Mayans were a civilization that achieved much and left behind a wealth of information about their culture and way of life. But despite this, many aspects of Mayan civilization remain a mystery. Their collapse, their writing, the methods used to construct their monumental buildings, and their understanding of astronomy are all enigmas that continue to inspire curiosity and research. The Aztecs were a powerful civilization that emerged in Mesoamerica in the 14th century and reached their peak in the 15th and 16th centuries. The Aztecs built a vast empire that stretched across much of present-day Mexico and parts of Central America. They developed a complex society with a sophisticated system of government, religion, and trade. But despite their achievements, the Aztecs fell to the Spanish conquistadors in the early 16th century. The Aztecs were a nomadic people who migrated to the Valley of Mexico in the 14th century. They established themselves on an island in the middle of a lake, where they founded the city of Tenochtitlan. Over time, the Aztecs built an impressive city with canals, causeways, and monumental architecture. The city was home to over 100,000 people and served as the center of the Aztec Empire. The Aztecs developed a complex system of government that was based on a combination of military power and religious authority. They were ruled by a king, or Tlatoani, who held both military and religious power. The Tlatoani was supported by a council of nobles and a powerful military. The Aztecs also had a well-organized bureaucracy that managed trade, taxation, and public works. The Aztecs were a deeply religious people who believed in a complex pantheon of gods and goddesses. They believed that their gods required human sacrifice to maintain the balance of the world. The Aztecs practiced human sacrifice on a large scale, and it is estimated that they sacrificed tens of thousands of people per year. The Aztecs were also skilled traders and developed a complex system of trade that stretched across much of Mesoamerica. They traded goods such as cotton, feathers, and precious stones for goods such as obsidian, gold, and copper. They also had a well-developed system of currency and used a type of money called cacao beans. The Aztecs reached their peak in the 15th century, but their empire began to decline in the early 16th century when the Spanish arrived in Mesoamerica. The Spanish were led by Hernán Cortés, who landed on the Gulf Coast of Mexico in 1519. The Aztecs initially welcomed the Spanish as gods, but they soon realized that they were not gods but rather ruthless invaders. The Aztecs fought bravely against the Spanish, but they were no match for the superior weapons and tactics of the conquistadors. The Spanish took Tenochtitlan in 1521, and the Aztec Empire fell. In conclusion, the Aztecs were a powerful civilization that achieved much in a relatively short period of time. They built a vast empire, developed a complex system of government and religion, and were skilled traders. But despite their achievements, the Aztecs fell to the Spanish conquistadors in the early 16th century. The fall of the Aztecs marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new one, with the arrival of the Europeans in the Americas, Dark Ages, uncovering the truth. The term Dark Ages has long been used to describe the period of European history between the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD and the beginning of the High Middle Ages in the 11th century. However, this term has been widely criticized for being misleading and inaccurate, as it implies that this period was a time of cultural and societal decline. In this chapter, we will examine the true nature of the Dark Ages and uncover the truth about this misunderstood period of history. The Dark Ages was a time of great transition and change in Europe. The fall of the Western Roman Empire brought about the end of the ancient world and the beginning of the medieval period. This transition was marked by political instability, invasions by barbarian tribes, and the rise of feudalism. However, it was also a time of cultural and societal development, with the emergence of Christianity as the dominant religion and the growth of monasticism. One of the main misconceptions about the Dark Ages is that it was a time of cultural decline. However, this is not the case. The period saw the emergence of the Carolingian Renaissance, a cultural revival that took place under the rule of Charlemagne and his successors. This Renaissance saw the preservation and dissemination of classical knowledge, the development of new forms of literature, and the growth of the arts. Another misconception is that the Dark Ages were a time of societal decline. In reality, the period saw the development of new forms of government and the emergence of feudalism as the dominant political system. Feudalism brought stability and order to Europe, and it provided a framework for the growth of trade and commerce. The rise of towns and cities also marked a significant change in societal organization. The Dark Ages was also a time of great religious change. The decline of the Roman Empire brought about the end of the traditional polytheistic religions of the ancient world, and the rise of Christianity as the dominant religion in Europe. The Catholic Church became a powerful institution, and monasticism emerged as a significant cultural force. The spread of Christianity also brought about the development of new forms of art and architecture, such as the Romanesque and Gothic styles. The term Dark Ages is also criticized for being Eurocentric, and for ignoring the cultural and societal developments that were taking place outside of Europe during this time period. The Islamic Golden Age, for example, saw significant advancements in science, medicine, mathematics and other fields, as well as the preservation of classical knowledge, and the Chinese Tang dynasty saw a flourishing of art, literature and culture. In conclusion, the Dark Ages was a period of great transition and change in Europe, marked by political instability, invasions by barbarian tribes, and the rise of feudalism. However, it was also a time of cultural and societal development, with the emergence of Christianity as the dominant religion, the growth of monasticism, and the Carolingian Renaissance. It's important to note that it was a period of complex developments, and not just a time of decline and darkness. The term Dark Ages is misleading and inaccurate, and it is time to rethink and redefine this misunderstood period of history. History of the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar were a medieval Christian military order that was founded in the early 12th century. They were known for their distinctive white mantles adorned with a red cross, and they quickly gained fame and wealth through their role in the Crusades and their financial activities. However, the Templars' rise to power was also met with suspicion and controversy, and their eventual downfall in the early 14th century has become shrouded in mystery and legend. In this chapter, we will examine the real history of the Knights Templar, uncovering the truth about this enigmatic order. The Knights Templar were founded in 1119 by a group of 9 knights led by Hugues de Payens, who sought to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. They established their headquarters on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which gave them their name. The Templars quickly gained support from the Church and from European monarchs, who saw them as a powerful military force in the Crusades. As the Templars' power and wealth grew, they began to expand their activities beyond their original mission of protecting pilgrims. They became involved in banking and financial activities, and they established a network of estates all over Europe and the Holy Land, making them one of the wealthiest organizations in the medieval world. They also had the ability to act as an independent sovereign, minting their own money, maintaining their own army and fleet. However, the Templars' wealth and power also attracted suspicion and jealousy from the Church and from European monarchs. In 1307, King Philip IV of France, who was heavily in debt to the Templars, accused the order of heresy and blasphemy and ordered the arrest of all Templars in France. The trials that followed were heavily influenced by the king's political agenda, and many Templars were tortured into confessing to false charges. The order was eventually dissolved by the Pope, and many Templars were executed or imprisoned. The fall of the Knights Templar has been the subject of much speculation and legend, with theories ranging from secret knowledge and hidden treasure to conspiracy and secret societies. However, it is important to note that the Templars' downfall was largely the result of political machinations and financial motives, rather than any sort of secret or occult practices. In conclusion, the Knights Templar were a powerful and wealthy medieval Christian military order that was founded to protect Christian pilgrims in the Holy Land. They expanded their activities beyond their original mission and became involved in banking and finance, making them one of the wealthiest organizations of the medieval world. However, their wealth and power attracted suspicion and jealousy, and they were ultimately dissolved by the Pope under pressure from King Philip IV of France. The true history of the Knights Templar is one of a powerful and influential organization, whose downfall was the result of political machinations, rather than any sort of secret or occult practices. Secret societies of the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages was a time of great social and political upheaval, with powerful monarchs and the Church exerting their influence over the masses. Amidst this tumultuous era, secret societies emerged as a means for individuals to come together in pursuit of common goals and ideals, often outside the realm of mainstream society. In this chapter, we will explore the secret societies of the Middle Ages, uncovering their origins, beliefs, and practices. One of the most well-known secret societies of the Middle Ages is the Knights Templar. As we previously discussed, the Templars were a Christian military order founded in the early 12th century to protect Christian pilgrims in the Holy Land. They quickly gained wealth and power through their involvement in the Crusades and banking and financial activities. However, their wealth and power also attracted suspicion and jealousy, and they were ultimately dissolved by the Pope under pressure from King Philip IV of France. Another secret society of the Middle Ages is the Order of the Dragon, also known as the Society of the Dragon. Founded in the 14th century by the Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund, the Order of the Dragon was a chivalric order that was dedicated to the defense of Christianity and the protection of the Holy Roman Empire. Members of the order were sworn to secrecy and pledged to defend the Church and the Empire against enemies both within and outside of its borders. The Free Spirit movement, also known as the Brethren of the Free Spirit, was a Christian sect that emerged in the late 13th century. The group believed that individuals could achieve a state of perfection and godliness in this life, and that this state of perfection would grant them freedom from the laws and moral codes of society. They rejected the authority of the Church and the state, and their teachings were considered heretical by the mainstream Church. The group was eventually suppressed by the Church, and its members were persecuted. The Beggars and Beguines were lay religious communities that emerged in the 13th century. They were composed of men and women respectively, who lived a communal lifestyle and devoted themselves to religious devotion and charitable works. They were considered unorthodox by the Church and were often persecuted for their beliefs and practices. Secret societies of the Middle Ages were often driven by a desire for spiritual enlightenment, the pursuit of knowledge, and the protection of their communities from external threats. However, their unorthodox beliefs and practices often put them at odds with the Church and the state, and many were persecuted as a result. In conclusion, secret societies were an integral part of the Middle Ages, providing a means for individuals to come together in pursuit of common goals and ideals outside the realm of mainstream society. The Knights Templar, the Order of the Dragon, Free Spirit movement, Beggars and Beguines were examples of such societies with different goals and ideologies, but all faced persecution for their unorthodox beliefs and practices. Despite this persecution, these secret societies have had a lasting impact on history and continue to be the subject of much speculation and fascination. History of the Renaissance. The Renaissance, which began in the 14th century and lasted until the 17th century, was a period of great cultural and intellectual rebirth that marked a turning point in European history. During this time, there was a renewed interest in the classical art, literature, and culture of ancient Greece and Rome, as well as a flourishing of new ideas and discoveries in science, art, and philosophy. However, beneath the surface of this cultural golden age, there were hidden currents of political and social upheaval that shaped the course of history. In this chapter, we will explore the hidden history of the Renaissance and uncover the stories and events that have been left out of the traditional narrative. One of the most significant hidden aspects of the Renaissance was the role of women. Despite the many brilliant female artists and thinkers of the period, such as Artemisia Gentileschi and Christine de Pizan, women were still largely excluded from the public sphere and denied access to education and opportunities for intellectual and artistic expression. Women were also used as political pawns by powerful men, with many being forced into arranged marriages for the sake of alliances and political gain. Another hidden aspect of the Renaissance was the role of secret societies. During this time, secret societies such as the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, and the Freemasons began to emerge. These societies were often composed of intellectuals, scientists, and artists who were interested in exploring new ideas and knowledge outside of the constraints of mainstream society. However, their unorthodox beliefs and practices often put them at odds with the church and the state, and many were persecuted as a result. The Renaissance was also a time of great political upheaval, with powerful city-states such as Florence and Venice vying for power and control. This led to many wars and conflicts, such as the Italian Wars, which lasted from 1494 to 1559, and saw the French, Spanish, and Holy Roman Empire all fighting for control of Italy. In addition, the Renaissance was also a period of great economic change, with the rise of mercantilism and the growth of international trade. This led to the development of a new class of wealthy merchants and bankers, who wielded significant power and influence in society. However, this economic growth also led to the exploitation of the lower classes and the widening of the gap between the rich and the poor. In conclusion, the Renaissance was a period of great cultural and intellectual rebirth, but it was also a time of hidden political and social upheaval. Despite the many brilliant female artists and thinkers of the period, women were still largely excluded from the public sphere. Secret societies emerged during this time, but many faced persecution for their unorthodox beliefs and practices. The Renaissance was also a time of great political upheaval, economic change, and class struggle, all events that shaped the course of history. It is important to acknowledge and understand this hidden history in order to have a more complete understanding of the Renaissance and its impact on the world. About the Salem witch trials. The Salem witch trials of 1692 and 1693 were a dark and tragic chapter in American history, in which dozens of innocent people were accused, tried, and executed for the crime of witchcraft. The trials, which took place in the small Massachusetts town of Salem, were fueled by a combination of religious fervor, political ambition, and personal greed. However, the true story of the Salem witch trials has often been obscured by myths and misconceptions. In this chapter, we will explore the truth about the Salem witch trials and uncover the stories and events that have been left out of the traditional narrative. One of the most significant misconceptions about the Salem witch trials is that they were the result of mass hysteria. In reality, the accusations of witchcraft were not made by an irrational mob, but by specific individuals with clear motives. Many of the accusers were young women who were seeking to escape difficult home situations or to gain power and control over their communities. Others were individuals with personal grudges or financial interests in the trials. Another misconception is that the trials were the result of a belief in actual witchcraft. In reality, the belief in witchcraft was not widespread in colonial America, and many of the accused had no knowledge of or interest in the occult. The trials were instead the result of a legal system that was poorly equipped to deal with the accusations, and a society that was deeply divided along religious, political, and economic lines. The trials were also shaped by the political and religious climate of the time. The colony of Massachusetts was deeply divided between the religious Puritans and the less religious Protestants. This division was further exacerbated by the arrival of a new governor, Sir William Phips, who brought with him a new political agenda and a desire to consolidate his power. He appointed a special court, known as the Court of Oyer and Terminer, to try the cases of witchcraft, which was headed by his own political allies. The trials also had a significant impact on the community of Salem and its surrounding areas. Many families were torn apart as loved ones were arrested, tried, and executed. The trials also had a chilling effect on free speech and dissent, as anyone who spoke out against the accusations or the court was at risk of being accused themselves. In conclusion, the Salem witch trials of 1692 and 1693 were a tragic and dark chapter in American history. They were not the result of mass hysteria, but of specific individuals with clear motives. The trials were not fueled by a widespread belief in witchcraft, but by a legal system that was poorly equipped to deal with the accusations, and a society that was deeply divided along religious, political, and economic lines. The trials also had a significant impact on the community and its surrounding areas, and had a chilling effect on free speech and dissent. Understanding the true story of the Salem witch trials is important in order to learn from the past and to ensure that such a tragedy never happens again. Unspoken history of slavery. Slavery is one of the most shameful and tragic chapters in human history, and it is a subject that has long been shrouded in silence and myth. The history of slavery is often told through the lens of the slave trade, but the reality of slavery was much more complex and nuanced than that. In this chapter, we will explore the unspoken history of slavery and uncover the stories and events that have been left out of the traditional narrative. One of the most significant misconceptions about slavery is that it was only practiced in the Americas by European colonizers. In reality, slavery has existed in almost every civilization throughout history. The ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans all enslaved people, and the transatlantic slave trade was just one of many different forms of slavery that existed in the world. Slavery in the Americas was also not limited to the practice of buying and selling enslaved people from Africa. Many enslaved people were captured and enslaved by native tribes and then sold to European colonizers. Others were born into slavery, as the children of enslaved people were also considered property. Slavery was also not limited to race, as many enslaved people were indigenous Americans, white Europeans, and people of mixed race. The life of an enslaved person was brutal and inhumane. Enslaved people were considered property, and they were treated as such. They were bought and sold like cattle, and they were forced to work long hours without pay, often under dangerous and inhumane conditions. Enslaved people were also subject to extreme violence, including beatings, rape, and murder, with little or no legal recourse. The abolition of slavery was a long and difficult process. It was not just a moral issue, but also a political and economic one. The abolitionist movement was met with strong resistance from the powerful slaveholding class, and it took many years of struggle and sacrifice before slavery was finally abolished. The legacy of slavery continues to shape the world today. The economic, political, and social systems that were built on the backs of enslaved people have left a lasting impact on the descendants of enslaved people. The legacy of slavery is also still felt in the ongoing struggles for racial justice and equality. In conclusion, the history of slavery is a complex and nuanced subject that has long been shrouded in silence and myth. Slavery has existed in almost every civilization throughout history, and not just in the Americas by European colonizers. The life of an enslaved person was brutal and inhumane, and the abolition of slavery was a long and difficult process. The legacy of slavery continues to shape the world today, and it is important to understand the unspoken history of slavery in order to learn from the past and ensure that such a tragedy never happens again. True story of the American Revolution. The American Revolution is one of the most significant events in world history, as it led to the formation of the United States of America and the establishment of a new form of government based on democracy and individual rights. However, the true story of the American Revolution is often obscured by myths and legends that have grown up around this seminal event. In this chapter, we will delve into the true story of the American Revolution, exploring the causes, course, and consequences of this revolutionary war. The American Revolution was not a sudden or spontaneous event, but rather the result of a long process of economic, political, and ideological change. The British government's attempts to exert greater control over the colonies, particularly in terms of taxation and trade regulation, led to growing resentment among the colonists. The colonies were also becoming increasingly prosperous and self-reliant, and many colonists began to see themselves as distinct from the British and began to desire greater autonomy. The spark that ignited the revolution was the British government's decision to send troops to occupy Boston in 1774, in response to growing unrest in the city. This move led to the formation of the Continental Army, under the command of George Washington, and the beginning of a long and bloody war. The American Revolution was not a war between a united people and a foreign invader, but rather a civil war in which many colonists remained loyal to the British Crown. The war was fought on many fronts, from the northern colonies to the southern colonies, and it was characterized by many brutal and bloody battles. The most famous of these battles include Lexington and Concord, Saratoga and Yorktown. The outcome of the American Revolution was not a foregone conclusion, and the war could have easily gone either way. The colonists were greatly outmatched in terms of manpower and resources, and they faced a powerful and experienced enemy. However, the colonists were able to secure key victories and gain support from foreign allies, which ultimately led to the defeat of the British. The American Revolution also had far-reaching consequences, both in the colonies and around the world. The war led to the formation of the United States of America, the world's first republic based on the principles of democracy and individual rights. The revolution also had a profound impact on the global balance of power, as it led to the decline of the British Empire and the rise of the United States as a major world power. In conclusion, the American Revolution was a complex and multifaceted event that was the result of a long process of economic, political, and ideological change. The war was fought on many fronts and was characterized by many brutal and bloody battles. The outcome of the war was not a foregone conclusion and had far-reaching consequences, both in the colonies and around the world. The American Revolution was not just a war for independence, but also a war for the birth of a new nation, and a new form of government based on democracy and individual rights. Agenda of the French Revolution. The French Revolution of 1789 to 1799 is one of the most significant events in world history, as it marked the end of the Ancien Regime and the beginning of the modern era. However, the true story of the French Revolution is often obscured by myths and legends that have grown up around this seminal event. In this chapter, we will delve into the hidden agenda of the French Revolution, exploring the causes, course, and consequences of this revolutionary period. The French Revolution was not a sudden or spontaneous event, but rather the result of a long process of economic, political, and ideological change. The Ancien Regime, which was the political and social system of France under the monarchy, was marked by a rigid social hierarchy and a highly centralized government. The country was also facing financial crisis with a high national debt and high taxes, which led to growing resentment among the people, particularly among the lower classes. The spark that ignited the revolution was the financial crisis and the government's inability to address it. This led to increasing discontent among the people, which was exacerbated by the Enlightenment ideas of equality, liberty, and fraternity. The political and social discontent led to the formation of the National Assembly, which sought to reform the Ancien Regime and establish a new form of government based on the principles of democracy and individual rights. The French Revolution was not a peaceful or orderly process, and it was characterized by many violent and bloody events. The most famous of these events include the storming of the Bastille, the Reign of Terror, and the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. The French Revolution also had far-reaching consequences, both in France and around the world. It led to the overthrow of the monarchy and the establishment of the First French Republic, which was based on the principles of democracy and individual rights. However, the French Revolution also had a hidden agenda, which was to spread the revolutionary ideals of democracy and individual rights throughout Europe. The French revolutionaries believed that the revolution in France could serve as a model for other countries, and that the revolutionary ideals would spread throughout Europe. This led to the French Revolutionary Wars, which were a series of wars fought by France against various European powers, with the goal of spreading the revolutionary ideals. In conclusion, the French Revolution was a complex and multifaceted event that was the result of a long process of economic, political, and ideological change. The revolution was characterized by many violent and bloody events, and it had far-reaching consequences both in France and around the world. The French Revolution also had a hidden agenda, which was to spread the revolutionary ideals of democracy and individual rights throughout Europe. The French Revolution was not just a revolution for France, but also a revolution for the birth of a new era and a new form of government based on democracy and individual rights. The story of the Wild West. The Wild West, also known as the American frontier, conjures up images of cowboys, gunslingers, and outlaws. But what is the real story behind this period of American history? The Wild West era lasted from the late 1700s to the early 1900s, and saw the expansion of the United States into the Western territories. The period is often romanticized in popular culture, but the reality was far from idyllic. The first wave of settlers to the West were primarily white men, who were attracted to the vast open land and the opportunity to start anew. They came in search of gold, land, and adventure. The government encouraged this westward expansion through policies such as the Homestead Act of 1862, which gave land to those who would settle and farm it. However, this influx of settlers brought conflict with the indigenous populations who had lived on the land for generations. The government's policies often led to the displacement and mistreatment of native peoples, and violent conflicts such as the Battle of Little Bighorn and the Wounded Knee Massacre occurred. As the population of the Western Territories grew, lawlessness also increased. Outlaws and gunslingers such as Billy the Kid and Jesse James became folk heroes in the eyes of some, but in reality they were criminals who terrorized communities. The government responded by sending in law enforcement, including the famous Texas Rangers and the U.S. Marshals Service. However, these lawmen were often outnumbered and outgunned by the outlaws. While the Wild West is often associated with cowboys, the reality was that the majority of settlers were farmers, merchants, and other civilians. However, the cowboy myth was popularized through literature, such as the dime novels of the time, and later through movies and television shows. The cowboy image has become an enduring symbol of the American West, but it is not an accurate representation of the majority of people who lived during this time. The Wild West was also a time of great economic and social change. The discovery of gold, silver, and other resources led to a boom in mining and industry. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, brought even more people and resources to the West, furthering its development. However, this rapid growth also led to exploitation and corruption, as large corporations and wealthy individuals took advantage of the situation. In conclusion, the Wild West was a complex period of American history, marked by both opportunity and hardship. The expansion of the United States into the Western Territories brought conflict with indigenous populations, lawlessness, and economic and social change. The popular image of the Wild West as a place of cowboys and outlaws is a romanticized version of the reality, which was far from idyllic. The true story of the Wild West is one of hardship, struggle, and resilience. Unknown history of World War I. World War I, also known as the Great War, was one of the most devastating conflicts in human history. The war, which lasted from 1914 to 1918, resulted in the deaths of millions of people and had a profound impact on the world. While the causes and events of the war are well known, there is also a lesser-known history of World War I that has been overshadowed by the more prominent narrative. One aspect of the war that is not well known is the role of colonial troops. Millions of men from colonies such as India, Africa, and the Caribbean were recruited to fight for the British and French armies. These men, often referred to as colonial troops or imperial troops, made up a significant portion of the Allied forces. However, their contributions have often been overlooked, and their sacrifices minimized. Many of these soldiers came from poor and working-class backgrounds, and were promised that they would be fighting for the freedom and rights of their home countries. However, upon returning home, they were often met with discrimination and racism, and their sacrifices were forgotten. Another aspect of World War I that is not widely known is the role of women. While the war is often remembered as a man's war, women played a significant role both on the home front and on the battlefield. Women worked in factories, farms, and hospitals, keeping the war effort going. They also served as nurses, clerks, and drivers, often in dangerous conditions. Some women even disguised themselves as men to fight on the front lines. However, their contributions were often overlooked, and they were not granted the same rights and recognition as their male counterparts. The war also had a significant impact on the Middle East, yet this aspect of the war is not well known. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire, which had controlled much of the Middle East for centuries, led to the formation of new countries and the redrawing of borders. The secret Sykes-Picot Agreement between the British and French governments divided the region into spheres of influence, setting the stage for ongoing conflicts and tensions in the region. The war also had a profound impact on the Russian Revolution of 1917. While the war was a major factor in the collapse of the Tsarist government, the Russian Revolution has often been portrayed as a separate event from World War I. However, the war played a significant role in the revolution and the subsequent formation of the Soviet Union. The war also led to the rise of communism and had a significant impact on the political landscape of the world. In conclusion, World War I was a complex and multifaceted conflict that had a profound impact on the world. While the causes and events of the war are well known, there is also a lesser-known history that has been overshadowed by the more prominent narrative. The role of colonial troops, women, the Middle East and the Russian Revolution are examples of the unknown history of World War I. It's important to remember and acknowledge these aspects of the war, as they give a more complete picture of the conflicts and its consequences. The unrevealed truth of World War II. World War II was one of the most devastating conflicts in human history, and it is still widely studied and remembered today. However, much of what is commonly known about the war is based on popular myths and misconceptions. In this chapter, we will explore some of the lesser-known aspects of the war, and uncover the truth behind some of the most enduring myths. One of the most widely held misconceptions about World War II is that it was a straightforward conflict between the Axis powers and the Allies. In reality, the war was much more complex, with many different nations and groups fighting for their own goals and interests. For example, the Soviet Union initially signed a non-aggression pact with Germany, but later joined the Allies after being invaded by the Nazis. Similarly, many countries in the Middle East and Asia were occupied by both Axis and Allied powers, and their populations often had to navigate a complex web of loyalties and betrayals. Another myth that persists to this day is that the war was won by the military genius of the Allies. While it is true that the Allies had many talented leaders and soldiers, they also benefited from a number of key advantages. One of the most important was their ability to mobilize their economies and populations for war, thanks to their superior industrial and technological capabilities. Additionally, the Allies had access to valuable intelligence and resources from occupied countries, which allowed them to make strategic decisions that often caught the Axis powers off guard. The Holocaust is one of the most infamous and tragic events of World War II. It is widely believed that the Nazis planned and executed the Holocaust as part of their overall war strategy. However, the reality is that the Holocaust was a separate and distinct program that was driven by the racist ideologies of the Nazi regime. The Holocaust was not a reaction to the war, but a pre-existing plan which was put into action as soon as the Nazis came to power. The extermination of Jews and other minority groups was not a military tactic, but a goal in and of itself. Another little-known fact about World War II is that the Nazis had developed a number of advanced weapons and technology that could have potentially changed the outcome of the war. These include the V-2 rocket, the first operational cruise missile, and the jet-propelled plane. The Nazis were also close to developing nuclear weapons, but their progress was halted by Allied bombing of their research facilities and the capture of key scientists. Finally, it is important to remember that World War II was a global conflict that affected millions of people, both on the front lines and on the home front. In addition to the military casualties, the war also resulted in the displacement of millions of people, as well as widespread destruction and economic devastation. The war also had long-lasting effects on the world, including the formation of the United Nations, the creation of the State of Israel, and the rise of the United States and Soviet Union as superpowers. In conclusion, World War II was a complex and multifaceted conflict that cannot be reduced to a few simple myths and misconceptions. By exploring some of the lesser-known aspects of the war, we can gain a deeper understanding of the events that shaped our world, and honor the sacrifices of those who fought and suffered during one of the darkest periods in human history. Cold War, a hidden history. The Cold War was a period of political and military tension between the Western powers, led by the United States, and the Eastern Powers, led by the Soviet Union, that lasted from the end of World War II in 1945 to the early 1990s. It is often referred to as a war because of the constant threat of nuclear war, but no actual fighting occurred between the two superpowers. While the Cold War is widely studied and discussed, there are many aspects of this period that are not well known or understood. One of the most hidden aspects is the role of espionage in shaping the course of the Cold War. Both the US and the Soviet Union engaged in extensive espionage activities, with the goal of gaining intelligence on the other side's military and political plans. One of the most famous examples of espionage during the Cold War is the case of the Cambridge Five, a group of British spies who passed classified information to the Soviet Union. The group, which included high-ranking government officials, operated for decades without detection and had a significant impact on the course of the Cold War. Another hidden aspect of the Cold War is the role of propaganda. Both the US and the Soviet Union engaged in extensive propaganda campaigns to shape the public's perception of the other side and the war itself. The US government, for example, created a division known as the Office of War Information, whose primary goal was to create and disseminate pro-American propaganda. The Cold War also had a significant impact on domestic politics in both the US and the Soviet Union. In the US, the fear of communism led to a period of intense political repression, known as the Red Scare. Many innocent people were accused of being communist sympathizers and were blacklisted or even imprisoned. In the Soviet Union, the government used the threat of the US as an excuse to crack down on political dissent and maintain a tight grip on power. The Cold War also had a significant impact on international relations. The two superpowers formed alliances with other countries, and these alliances often determined the course of international events. The US formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, while the Soviet Union formed the Warsaw Pact. These alliances were often used as a way to exert pressure on the other side, and they played a major role in shaping the political landscape of the world during this period. In conclusion, while the Cold War is often remembered as a time of political and military tension between the US and the Soviet Union, there were many hidden aspects to this period of history. Espionage, propaganda, domestic politics, and international alliances all played a significant role in shaping the course of the Cold War. It is important to understand these hidden aspects in order to fully understand the events of this period and their impact on the world today. History of the Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and 1960s is often remembered as a heroic struggle for racial equality, led by figures such as Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. However, there is much more to the story than is often told. One of the lesser-known aspects of the civil rights movement is the role played by the federal government. While the movement is often portrayed as a grassroots effort, it was in fact heavily influenced and supported by the FBI and other government agencies. J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI at the time, saw the civil rights movement as a threat to national security, and used the FBI's resources to monitor and disrupt civil rights groups. This included infiltrating groups with undercover agents, wiretapping leaders' phones, and even attempting to discredit leaders through false rumors and propaganda. Another hidden aspect of the civil rights movement is the involvement of the CIA. The CIA was heavily involved in covert operations in countries like Cuba and Angola, and saw the civil rights movement as a potential threat to American interests. They also actively worked to prevent communist influence within the movement, which led to the targeting and surveillance of Communist Party members and suspected sympathizers. The role of the government in the civil rights movement was not limited to federal agencies like the FBI and CIA. State and local governments also played a significant role in suppressing the civil rights movement. This included police brutality, the use of fire hoses and attack dogs against peaceful protesters, and the bombing of churches and homes of civil rights leaders. In addition to government opposition, the civil rights movement also faced resistance from powerful economic interests. Many Southern businesses, particularly those in the agricultural and textile industries, relied heavily on cheap black labor and saw the civil rights movement as a threat to their profits. These businesses used their influence to lobby against civil rights legislation and to pressure politicians to oppose the movement. Despite these hidden challenges, the civil rights movement ultimately succeeded in achieving many of its goals, including the desegregation of public spaces and the passage of civil rights legislation. However, it is important to remember that the struggle for racial equality was not simply a heroic effort led by a few charismatic leaders, but a complex and ongoing struggle that involved the efforts of many individuals, organizations, and government agencies. This chapter is a glimpse into the secret history of the civil rights movement and how it was not always a peaceful movement as it is usually portrayed. The involvement of the government and the resistance of powerful economic interests, both of which were determined to maintain the status quo, made the road to equality and freedom a much harder journey than it should have been. Uncovering of the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War is one of the most controversial and divisive conflicts in American history. It is widely acknowledged that the war had a profound impact on the country, both at home and abroad. However, there is still much that remains unknown or unspoken about the war, and many aspects of its history have yet to be fully uncovered. One of the most significant unknowns about the Vietnam War is the true extent of American involvement in the conflict. While it is widely acknowledged that the United States provided significant military and financial support to the South Vietnamese government, there is evidence to suggest that the US was even more deeply involved in the war than previously thought. For example, there are reports that the US conducted secret bombing campaigns in Laos and Cambodia, and that American special forces were actively engaged in combat operations in these countries. Additionally, there are indications that the US government may have played a role in the overthrow of the democratically elected government of South Vietnam in 1963. Another aspect of the Vietnam War that remains shrouded in mystery is the role played by the Central Intelligence Agency (CIA) in the conflict. While it is well known that the CIA was heavily involved in the war, there is still much that is not known about the agency's activities. For example, it is believed that the CIA conducted secret operations in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, but the full extent of these operations remains unclear. Additionally, there are suspicions that the CIA may have been involved in the assassination of President Ngo Dinh Diem of South Vietnam in 1963. Another unknown aspect of the Vietnam War is the true number of casualties. While the US government has acknowledged that over 58,000 American soldiers were killed in the conflict, many believe that this number is significantly higher. Additionally, it is estimated that millions of Vietnamese, Cambodians, and Laotians were killed or wounded during the war. Another unknown aspect of the Vietnam War is the true reason behind the US involvement in the conflict. While the official reason was to prevent the spread of communism, many believe that there were other factors at play. Some have argued that the war was a result of economic and political interests, while others have suggested that it was a result of the domino theory, which stated that if one country fell to communism, others would follow. The Vietnam War was one of the most controversial and divisive conflicts in American history. While much is known about the war, there are still many aspects of its history that remain unknown or unspoken. From the true extent of American involvement to the role played by the CIA, to the true number of casualties and the real reason behind US involvement, the war continues to raise questions and spark debate. Hidden truths of the Cold War. The Cold War was a period of political and military tension between the Western powers, led by the United States, and the Eastern powers, led by the Soviet Union, that lasted from the end of World War II until the early 1990s. It was a time marked by a constant state of tension, as both sides stockpiled nuclear weapons and engaged in proxy wars around the world. The Cold War was also a time of hidden truths, secrets, and covert operations, many of which have only come to light in recent years. One of the most significant hidden truths of the Cold War is the extent of the Soviet Union's espionage efforts in the United States. It was revealed that the Soviet Union had a vast network of spies in the US, many of whom were able to penetrate the highest levels of government and military. These spies were able to steal sensitive information and pass it on to Moscow, which allowed the Soviet Union to keep pace with the United States in the arms race. Another hidden truth of the Cold War is the extent of U.S. covert operations around the world. The CIA in particular was involved in a number of covert operations, including the overthrow of governments, the funding of rebel groups, and the assassination of foreign leaders. These operations were often kept secret from the American public and were only revealed years later. The Cold War also had a significant impact on the developing world, as the US and Soviet Union competed for influence in countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The US often supported authoritarian governments and dictators in order to prevent the spread of communism. This support often led to human rights abuses and destabilization of countries, which had long-lasting effects on those countries. The Cold War also had a significant impact on science and technology. Both the US and Soviet Union invested heavily in research and development, leading to advancements in fields such as space exploration and nuclear energy. However, the secrecy surrounding these advancements led to a lack of international cooperation and a lack of oversight, which had negative consequences. Finally, the Cold War also had a significant impact on domestic politics in the US. The fear of communism led to a Red Scare, where suspected communists were persecuted and civil liberties were curtailed. Additionally, the Cold War led to a military-industrial complex, where defense spending and the arms race became major drivers of the economy. In conclusion, the Cold War was a time marked by hidden truths and secrets. It was a period of political and military tension between the Western powers, led by the United States, and the Eastern powers, led by the Soviet Union. It was a time of espionage, covert operations, and proxy wars. It also had a significant impact on the developing world, science and technology, and domestic politics in the United States. The Cold War remains a fascinating period in history, and as more information comes to light, we are able to gain a deeper understanding of the events that shaped the world we live in today. Unveiling of the secrets of the Cold War. The Cold War, which lasted from the end of World War II to the early 1990s, was a period of intense tension and competition between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both sides were engaged in a global struggle for power and influence, and the world watched anxiously as they stockpiled nuclear weapons and engaged in proxy wars in various countries. Despite its significance, many aspects of the Cold War are still shrouded in mystery and secrecy. For years, governments and intelligence agencies kept information about the conflict classified, and much of it remains unknown to the general public. One of the most intriguing secrets of the Cold War is the role of espionage. Both the United States and the Soviet Union employed spies to gather information and influence events in other countries. The CIA and KGB were among the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world at the time, and their activities were often shrouded in secrecy. Many of the most famous spies of the Cold War, such as Kim Philby and Oleg Penkovsky, were not uncovered until long after the conflict had ended. Another hidden aspect of the Cold War is the role of technology. Both the United States and the Soviet Union spent billions of dollars on research and development to gain a military advantage. The United States, for example, developed the hydrogen bomb, stealth technology, and spy satellites. The Soviet Union, meanwhile, developed the R-7 Semyorka, the first intercontinental ballistic missile, and the MiG-25 Foxbat, a supersonic jet fighter. The Cold War also had a significant impact on domestic politics. In the United States, the conflict led to a Red Scare, in which many people were falsely accused of being communist sympathizers. This led to a climate of fear and mistrust, and many innocent people had their lives ruined as a result. In the Soviet Union, the Cold War led to the rise of the secret police and a culture of fear and repression. The Cold War also had a profound impact on international politics. The United States and the Soviet Union engaged in a global struggle for influence, and many countries were caught in the middle. The United States, for example, supported anti-communist governments in Latin America and Southeast Asia, while the Soviet Union supported communist governments in Eastern Europe and Africa. Finally, the Cold War had a significant impact on the environment. Both the United States and the Soviet Union conducted nuclear tests, which led to the contamination of land and water. Additionally, the arms race led to a massive increase in the production of weapons, which had a negative impact on the environment. In conclusion, the Cold War was a complex and multifaceted conflict that had a profound impact on the world. Despite its significance, many aspects of the Cold War are still shrouded in mystery and secrecy. The hidden truths of the Cold War reveal the complexity of the world during the years of tension and competition between the United States and the Soviet Union. The publisher. Accepting manuscripts in the most categories. We love to help people get their words available to the world. Revival Waves of Glory focus is to provide more options to be published. We do traditional paperbacks, hardcovers, audiobooks and ebooks all over the world. A traditional royalty-based publisher that offers self-publishing options, Revival Waves provides a very author-friendly and transparent publishing process, with President Bill Vincent involved in the full process of your book. Send us your manuscript and we will contact you as soon as possible. Contact Bill Vincent at RWG Publishing at yahoo.com. Story of the Vikings. The Vikings were a seafaring people from the late 8th to the early 11th century. They hailed from the Scandinavian countries of Norway, Denmark and Sweden, and they made a name for themselves as fierce warriors and skilled traders. But despite their reputation, much of the Vikings' history has remained shrouded in mystery. In this chapter, we will take a closer look at the Viking civilization and uncover some of the untold stories of these seafaring warriors. The Vikings were not just raiders and plunderers, as they are often portrayed in popular culture. They were also skilled traders, farmers and craftsmen. The Vikings were known for their advanced shipbuilding techniques and their seafaring abilities. They used their ships to trade with other cultures, such as the Byzantine Empire, the Islamic Caliphate and the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. They also used their ships to travel to far-off lands, such as Greenland and North America. The Vikings were also known for their fierce warrior culture. They were skilled fighters, and their reputation for violence and brutality preceded them. They conducted raids on the coasts of Europe, Britain, and even as far as Africa and Asia. The Vikings were also known for their prowess in battle, and they were feared by their enemies. Despite their reputation as warriors, the Vikings were also a highly religious people. They believed in a pantheon of gods, led by Odin, the god of war and wisdom. They also believed in an afterlife, and they believed that those who died in battle would go to Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain, where they would feast and fight for eternity. The Vikings were also known for their art and craftsmanship. They were skilled metalworkers and blacksmiths, and they produced a wide variety of objects such as weapons, jewelry, and household goods. They were also known for their intricate carvings and sculptures, many of which have been preserved to this day. The Viking civilization came to an end in the 11th century due to a combination of factors. The Vikings were eventually defeated by the kingdoms they had once terrorized, such as England and France. They also faced internal conflicts and the emergence of stronger empires, such as the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic Caliphate. The Vikings also faced changing economic and social conditions, which led to the decline of their seafaring and trading activities. In conclusion, the Vikings were a complex civilization that has been shrouded in mystery for centuries. They were not just raiders and plunderers, but they were also skilled traders, farmers and craftsmen. They were fierce warriors but also deeply religious people. They left a lasting impact on the world through their art, shipbuilding and exploration. The story of the Vikings is a fascinating one that deserves to be told, and the more we learn about them, the more we realize that there is still so much more to uncover. The mysterious disappearance of the Anasazi. The Anasazi, also known as the ancestral Pueblones, were a prehistoric indigenous people who lived in what is now the Four Corners region of the United States, including parts of modern-day Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. They are known for their impressive architectural achievements, including cliff-dwelling structures and Pueblo communities. However, the Anasazi civilization also experienced a mysterious disappearance, leaving behind many unanswered questions. In this chapter, we will explore the history of the Anasazi and the mystery surrounding their disappearance. The Anasazi civilization was believed to have emerged around the 1st century AD and reached its peak between the 12th and 13th centuries. They were skilled farmers, hunters and gatherers who built complex communities, including elaborate cliff-dwelling structures and multi-story pueblos. They also developed a sophisticated system of irrigation and terrace farming, which allowed them to sustain large populations in the arid southwest. They were also known for their intricate pottery, jewelry, and weaving. The Anasazi civilization was divided into several different cultural groups, including the Kayenta, the Mesa Verde, and the Chaco Canyon. The Chaco Canyon was the center of the Anasazi civilization, and it was home to the largest and most elaborate structures. The great house pueblos such as Pueblo Bonito were built with hundreds of rooms, and they were home to thousands of people. Despite their impressive achievements, the Anasazi civilization began to decline in the late 13th century. The exact cause of this decline is still a mystery, but several theories have been proposed. One theory suggests that the Anasazi civilization was hit by a prolonged drought, which made it impossible to sustain their agricultural practices. Another theory suggests that they were hit by a series of natural disasters, such as floods and fires. Some scholars have also proposed that the Anasazi civilization was hit by internal conflicts, such as warfare and disease. Whatever the cause of the decline, the Anasazi civilization experienced a rapid depopulation in the 14th century. Many of the communities were abandoned, and the Anasazi people migrated to other areas. The Chaco Canyon was one of the last places to be abandoned, and it was completely deserted by the end of the 14th century. The Anasazi civilization left behind many unanswered questions, and their disappearance remains one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. Many of the structures, artifacts, and ruins that have been discovered offer clues about their culture, but they do not fully explain the reasons for their decline and disappearance. Further research and excavations may provide more information about the Anasazi civilization and help to solve the mystery of their disappearance. In conclusion, the Anasazi civilization was one of the most advanced and complex cultures of pre-Columbian North America. They built impressive architectural structures, advanced irrigation systems, and developed a rich cultural heritage. However, their decline and disappearance remain a mystery. The Anasazi civilization remains an enigma of history, and their story is still waiting to be fully uncovered and understood.